Don't you dare sit before me, being just a wife.
Mike's roar filled the room, and at that moment, a dull pain shot through my belly, now at 6 months pregnant.
Ouch!
An unfamiliar pain coursed through my stomach, and I crumpled to the floor.
Madison, are you okay? Hey, what do you think you're doing?
While my mother-in-law and father-in-law quickly came to my aid, Mike, used to defying his parents, didn't seem fazed at all.
In this house, I'm the boss. I'm the smartest and most elite, that's why.
His tone, dripping with scorn as if laughing at everyone present, made me angry, but I was too afraid of being hit again to talk back. Just then, someone said "excuse me" and sat down next to Mike. I watched intently as the person pulled a business card from their pocket and handed it to Mike. My name is Madison. I'm turning 29 this year. I used to work for a telecommunications company after graduating from college, but I quit this summer. I wanted to stay at the company a bit longer, but Mike had asked me to quit because he said, "I'll take care of you." The truth is, there was another reason why I quit my job. I was pregnant with Mike's child. Mike and I ended up in what you might call a shotgun wedding. Currently 5 months pregnant, I had to tell my colleagues it was because of the pregnancy and marriage. They were sad to see me go, but congratulated me on the marriage and pregnancy. I still feel blessed for having such wonderful colleagues. So, I do have some regrets about quitting my job at Mike's request. Mike's words always carried an absolute power. If you want to put it nicely, you could say he's full of confidence. If not, well, he's kind of pushy. Mike graduated from a very prestigious private university and went on to work at the mega bank Bank of America, following an elite path. He was assigned to the sales department, where his gift of gab helped him quickly climb the ranks, and right around when we were getting married, he was promoted to head of the sales department. Lucky for us, I'm excellent. Now the family's secure, he said, as if his promotion was the most natural thing in the world. Mike must have been pleased his efforts were being recognized, and at that time, I didn't give it much thought. After all, I had no inkling to doubt the man I was about to marry. But at that moment, I was still unaware. Unaware of the kind of person Mike really was. I met Mike 2 years ago at a mixer that a friend had arranged. I was 27 then. As my friends were getting married one after another, I felt a sense of urgency without having a partner. Because of my personality, I couldn't take the initiative to talk to men, and I was always shy about love. So when a college friend I hadn't heard from in a long time contacted me, I jumped at the chance. The mixer was with 3 men and 3 women, and Mike was the oldest of the male group. They all worked at Bank of America, where my friend's childhood friend was employed. When I first heard that all the men were employees at a well-known bank, I was surprised. My 2 friends, who were more interested in money than I was, eagerly questioned the men and squealed with excitement. I felt somewhat out of place and was about to give up, thinking this might be another dead end. But, as luck would have it, Mike seemed to take a liking to me, hanging back while my 2 friends were in the spotlight. I was surprised when he asked, "Would you like to grab a drink after this?" Since Mike was also my type, I happily agreed with an enthusiastic yes. So, after the group date, we went out a few times, and after a confession from Mike, we started seeing each other. When I asked Mike why he hadn't gotten married yet, he'd always say, "Oh, you know, I've been busy with work." He must really love his job. Since I admire men who are dedicated to their work, I didn't mind it at all. While we were dating, Mike was always considerate, practicing chivalry and always putting me first. "Are you okay? Not tired from walking? Forgot your handkerchief? I have one, use mine. Look, your shoe's rubbing. Let me put a band-aid on for you." His perfect gentlemanly behavior had really impressed me. I thought maybe I could spend my life with this man. Even though our relationship had just begun, I was already dreaming about a future with Mike. Our relationship took a significant step forward about 2 months ago, a year and a half after we started dating. I had been experiencing some unexplained health issues for a while. I had headaches and nausea, and when I went to the doctor, they just said it was probably a cold, and I couldn't even work properly. Seeing my condition, Mike, who I was living with, said,
Madison, could you be pregnant? Huh?
His unexpected words threw me for a loop. But indeed, there were signs. I rushed to the pharmacy to buy a pregnancy test, tried it at home, and lo and behold, it indicated that I was indeed pregnant.
I can't believe it. It looks like I'm really pregnant. See, I told you. You should go to the doctor.
Yeah. Mike was trying to keep his cool, but his voice was louder than usual. I could tell he was excited. There was a baby inside me, our baby. I thought about it as I rubbed my belly. It made me feel an indescribable sense of affection. The next day, I went straight to the OB/GYN. The test confirmed that there was indeed a baby, and I was told I was 3 months pregnant. The doctor said, "It's surprising you didn't notice until now, but since Mike and I weren't married yet, pregnancy had been the furthest thing from my mind." But now, looking back, I realized that the strange malaise was morning sickness. After leaving the clinic, I told Mike that the pregnancy was going well.
That so?
His reaction wasn't what I expected. I thought he would be happier, but his response was surprisingly nonchalant, which caught me off guard.
Mike, does this mean? Yeah, let's get married.
He said it so casually that it was nothing like the proposal I had imagined. But I was thrilled that he suggested we get married, so I was too excited to fall asleep that night. But even then, the change in Mike had already begun. It was my fault I didn't notice. The next day, before going to work, Mike said to me,
I want you to quit your job before we get married. What?
Quitting my job hadn't crossed my mind. The telecommunications company I worked for was supportive of women taking maternity leave, and everyone came back after their leave. Sure, some people quit when they get married because they're in a long-distance relationship and have to move away to be with their husband. But few people resign just because they're getting married or pregnant.
But I want to keep working. It's fine. I'll provide for us. But still.
When I hesitated, Mike let out an exasperated sigh and added,
I'm going to be promoted to sales manager next month. So my salary's gonna be way better. Lucky you, I'm so capable. Now our family will be set. That's great.
What could I say to that? It's true Mike is capable, and his promotion must be a recognition of his efforts. Compared to Mike's salary, mine is indeed just small change. Even if I quit, the three of us could live comfortably. I convinced myself of that. In the end, I submitted my resignation at work, and a month later, I left the company. My colleagues were all sad to see me go, but when I explained the situation, they said, "Can't be helped. You can't go against the man you're going to marry." That's probably what they meant. I thought that from then on, Mike and I would start our happy days together, thinking about our coming child, but I was naive. It was around this time that I started to notice the changes in Mike.
Hey Madison, where's my dress shirt? If it's about the shirt, I'm planning to wash it today. What? You haven't washed it yet? For a stay-at-home wife, you sure work slow.
I was feeling unwell yesterday. I'm sorry. Once I quit my job, Mike started to say things like, for a stay-at-home wife, you're pretty slow with the chores. I really want to finish my tasks swiftly, but with the early stages of pregnancy, I've been feeling unwell and can barely take care of myself. He also said things like, you're so useless, that's why you could quit your job so easily. If it were me, they'd have begged me to stay, belittling my capabilities. Even though it was Mike who wanted me to quit, I'm infuriated by the way he speaks to me. But due to my continued ill health and lack of energy to stand up to Mike, all I could do was hang my head in those moments. Seeing that I didn't fight back, Mike seemed to think he could treat me like a punching bag, venting his work frustrations on me.
That guy is totally useless. Just a newbie and already leaving on time. There are too many incompetents in the world. Even the bosses are just old and can't do their jobs.
I found all his comments unbearable because they were so disdainful. But now, having quit my job, I had to endure it because he was the only one supporting me and the child. Months passed like this, with me feeling restricted, until I overcame the long period of morning sickness and entered the stable period of my 6th month of pregnancy.
I'd like to arrange a meeting to introduce our families for the wedding. Can you check with your parents for their availability?
We hadn't yet greeted each other's parents formally, nor had we had a family meet and greet due to my pregnancy, as gathering multiple times would be difficult. So we thought, why not gather both families together all at once?
All right.
Mike agreed surprisingly readily and immediately contacted his family. I reached out to mine as well, and we found a date that worked for everyone. Eventually, the wedding introduction and family meet and greet were set for 2 weeks later on Sunday. I was preparing myself mentally and physically for the day, but Mike kept ordering me around as if I was using pregnancy as an excuse to slack off on housework. I was never slacking, I was just taking breaks now and then. Why must I be spoken to this way, I wondered, as my frustration built up. Then came the Sunday 2 weeks later. We headed to the event, which would take place at Mike's parents' home due to the large number of attendees.
Welcome, Madison. We've been looking forward to meeting you. It's nice to meet you. My name is Madison. I hope to get along well with everyone.
His parents seemed kind and classy, which put me at ease. They were very happy when I handed them the flowers I brought as a gift. In addition to Mike's parents, there were cousins, uncles, and aunts. My family was also there, sitting politely in the living room. I stood in the kitchen with my mother-in-law, helping to prepare the meal, and she was constantly concerned about my being pregnant.
Are you okay, Madison? If you're not feeling well, you can sit and wait. Thank you. I'm fine for now. I'll take a break if I get tired.
Grateful for her concern, I continued to chop and cook. But as she said, after about 30 minutes, my back started to hurt from the weight of my belly.
I'm sorry, I need to rest for a bit. Of course. There are cushions over there, please have a seat. Thank you.
I sat down on a cushion in the living room, as indicated by my mother-in-law. At first, I had a pleasant chat with Mike's relatives, but then Mike, who had been drinking, came over to where I was sitting.
You shouldn't be sitting down before me, being just a wife.
As Mike shouted, a dull pain shot through my 6-month pregnant belly.
Ow!
I crumpled to the floor in a pain I had never felt before.
Madison, are you all right? Hey, what are you doing?
My mother-in-law and father-in-law quickly came to my aid, but Mike, used to defying his parents, seemed unfazed.
In this house, I'm the top dog, you know? I'm the smartest and the elite here.
His words were a sneer at everyone present, and though I was filled with anger, I was too afraid of another violent outburst to speak up. At that moment, someone said excuse me and sat down next to Mike. I watched intently as he pulled a business card from his breast pocket and handed it to Mike.
Huh? What's that, eh?
Mike's eyes widened in astonishment as he looked at the business card passed to him from the man. The relatives were all like, "What's going on?" focusing their attention on Mike and the others.
Smith General Trading Company. You're familiar with our company, right? I mean, familiar is an understatement. Smith Corp is one of the major clients at our USMK Bank. Good to know. It's an honor. I am Madison's younger brother, a graduate of T University, and currently the president of Smith Corporation.
The man was my brother, Kenneth Smith. Smith was my maiden name. I glanced briefly at my brother and parents' faces. My brother was looking straight into Mike's eyes, but I could see the flames of anger burning in his eyes. My parents looked at me and nodded, "It's okay."
T University. President of Smith General Trading. You're Madison's brother?
Yes.
You weren't aware of that, I see. I didn't hear about it.
This time, Mike glared at me. I instinctively looked away. The reason I hadn't told Mike about Smith General Trading was that I feared his high pride would make him unreasonably jealous. Smith General Trading is a major corporation known to everyone in the States, with annual sales reaching $100 billion. If you get a job there straight out of college, you're considered very capable, and I hear it's even harder to get in as a mid-career hire. Kenneth was the president of Such Smith General Trading. He is still young at 27, but since he was a child, our father had drilled into him how to manage a business, and after graduating from college and joining Smith Corp, Kenneth quickly started to excel. Just as my father began to follow more often and started taking more time off work, a meeting was called to discuss whether it might be best to just go ahead and hand over the reins of the company to Kenneth early. Come this April, Kenneth finally became the president.
Well, I didn't need to hear it, but there's something I have to tell you. What is it?
Kenneth spoke in a businesslike and polite tone, but Mike continued to act defiantly.
In fact, there's been an issue with some fraudulent activities in the transactions between our two companies. Fraud?
Mike's voice quivered. Perhaps it struck a chord.
Yes. Apparently, our sales manager had given some under-the-table money to your sales rep, encouraging them to fudge the numbers on the invoices. And that sales rep was you. What?
Mike visibly panicked. What does this mean? The rest of us, including relatives, waited for the story to continue.
You were recently promoted to sales manager, I hear. It was in recognition of your hard work, no doubt. But it's not hard to imagine that this position was attained through rampant dishonesty. Of course, I fired our idiot sales manager immediately, but if I report this to your company, you're not going to get off scot-free.
I see. That's what it was. Mike had been accepting bribes from the Smith Company's sales manager by sending falsified invoices. He had increased his sales figures by engaging in similar fraudulent activities with other companies, which led to his promotion to sales manager. While Kenneth's guess was included, the fact that Mike didn't deny it suggested that it was true. Mike trembled on the spot, glaring at Kenneth with eyes like he was looking at an enemy. We couldn't say anything and watched the confrontation with bated breath.
Now, you've climbed the ranks through dishonesty, but just from seeing your behavior today, it's clear. You're not cut out to be in a position of leadership. Punching your pregnant wife's belly? Thinking you're the most important person in this house? Don't joke with me. You always ordering my sister around, thinking you're some kind of elite because you cheated your way up?
Kenneth's polite tone suddenly turned harsh as he scolded Mike. In his eyes, there was a determination to defeat his sworn enemy.
What the hell are you on about? Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong.
Mike snapped back. I clearly saw Kenneth smirk at that response.
You just said what the hell, didn't you? Yeah, I did. So what? I don't want to do business with someone who talks that way to a partner. I thought your company would be a good business partner for us, but I was mistaken. Please ensure your company knows that we will no longer be dealing with you in any capacity. What?
Mike had not expected to be hit with a sanction as serious as ending transactions between the Smith Company and MK Bank of America.
Please, not that. Anything but that.
Mike begged desperately, but Kenneth, perhaps at his wit's end with anger, glared and said sharply,
Aren't you apologizing to the wrong person? I have no use for someone who can't even understand that.
Mike let out a pathetic yelp at Kenneth's shout. I was utterly shocked to see Mike like this. I had never seen him so shaken before.
He tentatively looked my way, then said, I'm really sorry. And to the baby, I'm sorry, it must have hurt.
But the words Mike had said to me in the past flashed through my mind, and I could not forgive him just because he was apologizing now.
I'm sorry, but I need some time to think about this marriage, I refused him.
Mike stood up, dazed, and walked out of the room. Silence followed among us, but when Kenneth humbly apologized for the fuss at such a gathering, one of the relatives said, Let's just toast for today, and the atmosphere brightened up. For a while, we all forgot about Mike's troubles and had a good time. Madison, I'm really sorry for what Mike has done. There's no rush on the marriage decision, you can take your time. Madison, to your whole family, I'm truly sorry. Mike's parents said, tears brimming in their eye. Despite having such wonderful parents, I couldn't help but feel sad wondering how Mike ended up the way he did. No, we're the ones who should apologize for causing such a commotion. Everyone, I'm sorry.
Just give me a little more time to think, I said.
No one in my family blamed me for my decision. My parents' eyes conveyed a message: you need to think this through. As I rubbed my belly, I thought about what comes next. Currently, the idea of marrying Mike doesn't sit well with me. But for the sake of this child. Still, no clear answer came to me. I decided to take my time with the decision. A month has passed since then, and I've decided to stay with my parents until the baby is born. As expected, Mike's misconduct at work came to light, and he was fired. Smith General Commerce, a major client, apparently stopped doing business with Bank of America MK as Kenneth had declared. Mike ended up imposing a great loss on his company and losing his job. But he kept coming to my parents' house every day, begging for forgiveness and saying he'd do anything.
You say you'll do anything. But you don't even have a job, do you? Yeah, but I'll find something else, I'll make it work. Please, reconsider, Mike pleaded.
Mike suddenly started talking sense, but it's easy to say anything if it's just talk. However, I've heard from Kenneth that Mike's misdeeds have become well known in the area, and companies are tightening their hiring standards to avoid employing someone like him. If I were in charge of hiring, I couldn't imagine hiring someone who had committed fraud at their previous job. It's clear to see that getting rehired isn't as simple as Mike suggests. At best, he might be able to get a part-time job, but I couldn't see how a part-time job could support me, the baby, and him. Not long ago, I was struggling with the decision to marry him, but hearing Mike's flippant ideas, I finally made up my mind. What Mike did is unforgivable. Not only did he harass me, but he also caused trouble for the company that had been paying him a generous salary. He has a significant debt to pay. With a sigh, I spoke up.
Look, you think you can just find a job and everything will be okay? Who's going to hire someone like you? I certainly wouldn't. You can't live with us. Don't ever show your face to me again.
As I spoke, I could see tears of frustration welling up in the corners of Mike's eyes.
What? Why?
He muttered, repeating himself as if in a trance, but after seeing my stern glare, he seemed to realize that nothing more he said would make a difference. Eventually, he walked away with slumped shoulders. Finally, I felt a weight lift from my whole body, and I was able to watch Mike's departing figure with a sense of relief. It might be slightly unfair to the child, but it's better not to have such a father. I'll make sure our child is happy. Once the baby is a bit older, I plan to go back to work, maybe dropping the kid off at daycare. Luckily, a former colleague from my old job has reached out, asking if I'd consider coming back. I look forward to the day I can return to work, but for now, I'll take each day at a time with my child.
Such a bad husband. Doing this on your wedding day. Well, this is the best way to relax when you're nervous, isn't it?
On the wedding day, I glanced into the dressing room and there were Evan and Sarah, entwined without a stitch on.
What a pain, this happily ever after wedding show-off of Emily's.
That's cruel.
What's the main attraction saying? I'm not the main attraction. It's funny though, Emily doesn't look the part of the star either, does she? No matter how much she dresses up, a plain Jane is just a plain Jane. She's just making a spectacle of herself.
I was the only one who was swept up in the wedding fever. Until just now, my heart had been racing, but it suddenly calmed down. Sarah looks more fitting in her current indecent form than any white dress. They've insulted me plenty, so why not make them today's main attraction? My name is Emily Smith, and I'm 32 years old. I met him at a social gathering, and after a year, he finally proposed. Not in some fancy restaurant with a sparkling diamond ring, but in our usual pub. His name is Evan. We are both straightforward people. Let's keep this going, we toasted with beers. Even though he proposed, we didn't get married right away. He respected my wish for a modest wedding, so we planned it for a year later. Touring various wedding venues and bridal fairs was a fresh and fun experience. Being called groom and bride made us blush and smile at each other. I had heard about it, but I never realized you can't just rush into a wedding right after deciding to have one.
Yeah, I thought a year later was way too far out, but it's actually okay.
Right? And the cost we thought was a joke turned out to be real. There's a reason the wedding is set for a year later. Here's this month's share. Thank you.
Got it, thanks.
I handed over $1,500 to Evan. He quickly counted the bills and pocketed the money. This is for our wedding in a year. We each contribute $1,500 every month, and by the end of the year, we should have saved up around $40,000. Evan's in charge of managing it. $1,500 a month is a lot, but we can do it because we both live with our parents.
By the way, which venue looks good to you? I guess your mom's place is nice, right?
Actually, my mother works at a wedding venue. I was worried Evan would feel awkward at my mom's workplace, but he was the one who insisted on it.
The venue was really nice, and it's a big help that they'll give us the family discount.
Evan's practical like that. This is how our wedding preparations went smoothly. We've already met each other's parents. We wanted to discuss things before meeting at the venue, so we started visiting each other's homes more often. It could have been in a cafe, but Evan's mom treats me like family. She says, come over anytime, so I've been hanging out at my in-laws' place.
Wow, they have a dessert buffet these days? How can I eat a lot in a tight dress? Oh, Mom, it's a wedding. It would be weird if the groom's mother is just chowing down. That's true, what a shame.
We always had such light-hearted discussions. But then Sarah showed up and the atmosphere changed completely. No way.
Evan's getting married for real? That's hilarious.
As usual, I was visiting my in-laws when she barged in. Without introducing herself, she pointed at me and laughed. Is this who you're marrying?
Well, I guess that's about right for Evan.
She's a young and cute girl with soft curls and glossy lips. In contrast, I was in a hoodie and barely any makeup since I wasn't going anywhere. Her words made me angry, but I wasn't dressed to talk back with confidence. It was frustrating, but I bit my lip and looked to Evan for help. Evan scratched his head, looking a bit embarrassed.
Come on, Sarah, that's rude.
Then Evan introduced her. She's his cousin, apparently. Sarah is 5 years younger than Evan but acts way more superior.
Evan's over 30, can't be picky anymore, huh? So this is the kind of person that's realistic for him.
Evan just laughed it off. My in-laws scolded Sarah for her rudeness. I was smiling on the outside, wondering if we really had to invite this rude girl to the wedding, but I was annoyed inside. Sarah had just arrived, but my mother-in-law suggested Evan drive her home. Sarah left the house looking displeased. After Evan and Sarah left, my in-laws apologized.
Emily, we're so sorry. Sarah doesn't think before she speaks. She's always treated Evan like a little follower since they were kids. Maybe she's upset you're taking him away.
A cute little girl's follower, huh? Is that why he couldn't stand up for me, because he can't go against the boss? Ridiculous for adults. I'm not bothered at all. I replied cheerfully, trying not to let my in-laws sense my true feelings. The next weekend, there was a big problem during our meeting at the venue.
Sorry I'm late.
Who was it again? Oh right, Emily. You blend in too much, I had to look for you. Sarah had followed Evan to our meeting place.
After all, I have way better taste than Emily. If it's a wedding, you gotta go big or go home.
Leaving a confused me behind, the two of them huddled close together. Sarah had taken it for granted to join the wedding planning.
Hey Evan, don't you think these flowers are nice? Yeah, that's nice.
Evan was flanked by two women. One was chirping away with suggestions, clearly enjoying herself, yet she was an outsider. And there I was, the actual bride-to-be, wearing a gloomy expression. It felt like a bizarre scene. The wedding planner, with a vague smile, nodded along to Sarah, trying to include me by saying, "The bride thinks." but was drowned out by Sarah's excited voice. After a while, Sarah glanced back and forth between me and the planner, letting out a chuckle.
Hey, we're not planning a funeral here. It's seriously killing the vibe that this spot is so gloomy. If you're not into it, Emily, maybe you should just head home?
Right now, I must be sporting the most idiotic look imaginable. I can't close my gaping mouth. Sarah's behavior is so incomprehensible to me, she's starting to seem like an alien.
It was Emily who wanted to have a wedding. But to then just dump all the decisions on Sarah is just not cool. You just wanted to dress up and have everybody make a fuss over you, didn't you?
Evan was an alien too. Even though he seemed so normal up until a moment ago, I can't wrap my head around this.
It's cool. I love organizing events. I often do barbecues and Christmas parties with friends. Leave the wedding planning to me. You're awesome, Sarah. I'm counting on you.
Yeah, I guess. At this rate, my wedding will become Sarah's thing. I want to scream no, I hate this, but no voice comes out. The more I panic, the more my throat constricts. Evan and Sarah are laughing hysterically.
Evan.
Just then, a voice came from behind. It was slow and polite, not loud, but carried well. The laughter from Evan and Sarah stopped. When I turned around, my mother was there.
Evan, who is this woman? She seems rather like the bride.
Evan quickly distanced himself from Sarah. In a contrived manner, he twined his arm around mine and turned a smile to my mother.
I apologize, but you're causing a disturbance for the other couples here, so could you please keep it down a bit?
Ah, yes, sorry.
Thank you. Then, your companion should be leaving, right?
Eh? Oh, yes. My mother was smiling sweetly, yet there was a strong pressure about her. She forcefully sent Sarah home. That evening, my mother was shaking her head in disbelief, worried about us.
Evan seemed like such a serious guy, right? Bringing a woman who looks like a mistress to the wedding planning, what's gotten into him?
Evan is Sarah's underling.
Underling?
After I explained that Sarah was my cousin and the dynamics between them, my mother just shrugged.
What's that about? We're not in grade school.
My mother, who's been involved in many weddings, says that troubles often lurk behind the seemingly happy wedding ceremonies. Of course, the stars of a wedding are the bride and groom, but often parents and others interject and try to shape the wedding to their own liking.
I don't care if she's a cousin or a boss, the wedding is for Emily and Evan.
Since then, Sarah stopped showing up. Thankfully, the planning proceeded smoothly, but Evan seemed bored. He would only respond with "I think it's fine" to anything asked. Eventually, even his tuxedo was left up to me with a careless "do whatever you like." Not just in the planning, but generally, he's been pretty indifferent towards me. Maybe the reality of marriage is bringing up all sorts of anxieties. We're probably both experiencing cold feet. I remember my mother once said, many couples fight before the wedding. It's understandable since it's a big change. We're supposed to overcome these little bumps and grow as a couple. After several arguments and makeups, a year flew by in no time. It's finally the day of the wedding.
Man, I'm nervous.
Evan can't seem to sit still, pacing from one end of the bridal suite to the other. The speech we practiced is ready to go. No matter how many times I reassure him with "it's gonna be okay," Evan is still restless. We exchange wry smiles when, without a knock, the door swings open.
Hey, where's the bride and groom?
My face froze in an instant. It was Sarah.
There you are. Haven't you two done your makeup or gotten dressed yet? You're so plain I didn't even notice.
Laughing, Sarah was in a stark white dress. And a mini skirt above the knee at that, bare-legged. Such an outfit would seem adorable to a child about 3 years old, but it's preposterous for an adult. She said she came early to get her hair set at the venue. But still, it was too early. I couldn't help but suspect she was here to mock us.
Hey, isn't my dress cute? I might even be mistaken for the bride.
I didn't want any unpleasantness on this special day. I forced a dry laugh. Soon it was time for my makeup to begin. Ushered by the staff, Sarah left the dressing room. I sat down in front of a large mirror, relieved. But I couldn't see Evan anywhere during the makeup. He must have been nervous and walking around in the lobby, so I went to look for him after finishing. Since it wasn't time for the guests to arrive, only the staff were in the lobby. So then, the garden, the restroom. As I pondered and walked down the hall, I stopped in front of the relatives' room. The bride and groom's room is a bright and all-white space. It's luxurious, with a bed and a bathroom even, in the back of the makeup room. We aren't going to stay overnight, when would we even use this? Evan and I had laughed about it. On the other hand, the relatives' room had a more subdued brown palette. I became curious about that relative's room and quietly opened the door. First, I saw the counter where drinks for hospitality would soon be arranged. It was a 2-room suite, with comfy sofas lined up in the room beyond. Evan had said during our venue tour, "I like the relatives' room better than the bride and groom's. You can totally crash on those big sofas." As expected, there was a noise coming from the back. But something was off. It sounded like the faint meowing of a cat. And the sofa was creaking unnaturally. My heart was pounding as if it would break. From beyond the thin wall, I heard Sarah's voice. "Such a bad husband. Doing this on your wedding day." I didn't need to see to understand what nasty thing Sarah was up to from the sounds alone. But the other should be someone I don't know. I hoped. But this is the best way to relax before the big moment, isn't it? That was unmistakably Evan's voice. I collapsed on the spot, limp. In a daze, I peeked into the next room. No mistake about it. Evan and Sarah were entwined, naked. Evan, burying his face in Sarah's chest, cooed for one more time. "Are you sure we have time? Is the groom supposed to be doing this?" "It's fine. My prep will take just 10 minutes. Man, I'm so over this Emily's show-off happy wedding." That's terrible. The star of the show's saying that? I'm not the star. It's funny though, Emily doesn't look the part of the star either, does she? No matter how much she dresses up, a plain Jane is just a plain Jane. She's just making a spectacle of herself. Was I the only one excited about the wedding? Suddenly my heart went quiet. Once I calmed down, hatred bubbled up within me for the two of them, entangled with not a stitch on. Sarah suited this scandalous look far more than any white dress. They had spent all this time mocking me, I'd make them the main event of today. After a while, when I stepped out of the dressing room, my mother, with a pale face, rushed over. "I will never forgive this." When I said this firmly, my mother nodded solidly. 20 minutes later. "Huh? Why?" Evan is trying to forcefully open the door to the family waiting room. But it shouldn't open. I borrowed the key from my mother and locked him in. I even rigged a door jamb. "Hey, is anybody there? It won't open." Evan is banging on the door, calling for help. He's blissfully unaware of what's happening outside. "What are you doing there?" I asked. "Emily, is that you? The door won't open. Can you open it from the outside?" "Do you want me to open it?" "Huh? Of course I do. Hurry up." He seems a bit irritated. I unlocked the door from the outside for him. As soon as Evan came out of the dressing room, he grabbed my shoulder. "Why didn't you open it right away?" Evan stopped his motion abruptly. And no wonder, behind me were all my relatives, Evan's relatives, and even the wedding venue staff. "What's the matter?" Sarah, popping her head out, seemed to have sensed the tense atmosphere. She tried to pass it off with a thin smile. "What's going on, everyone?" "I was just taking a little tour of the wedding venue and it seems I got locked in. I was really in a bind." She started making excuses without anyone asking. Evan's relatives opened their mouths with a look of dissatisfaction. "We got a call from the venue saying something serious had happened and to come quickly."
Is it just that Evan and Sarah were locked in? What a stupid prank. We rushed over here for this nonsense?
The other relatives showed concern with comments like, "Is Sarah okay?" To the relatives gathered without an explanation, it seemed as though I was making a big fuss over nothing. That's when I confessed the real reason.
The truth is, Evan and Sarah were, just until a moment ago, cheating in this room. What?
Evan, Sarah, and the relatives all had their eyes wide open. Evan first tried to grab me by the collar, but then, seemingly conscious of the people around, he awkwardly put his arm around my shoulder.
What are you talking about? You're mistaken. Were you dreaming or something?
His mouth is smiling, but his eyes are pressing me to shut up. It was like being glared at by a snake, and it was scary, but I continued expressionlessly.
It's not a mistake. I saw it. That's why I locked the two of them in this room. Emily, don't tell lies.
Evan's forced smile was strained. Seeing this, Sarah tried to throw him a lifeline. Emily, please stop this. Look, everyone. Emily gets really jealous.
She's mad because Evan and I are close. One time, I was kindly helping with the wedding preparations, and she sent me away. She's just a cousin, but it's weird to be jealous, right? Essentially, she just hates cute little me. But to tell such a lie, that's the worst.
Unlike Evan, Sarah's calm explanation had the relatives nodding. They began whispering to each other while looking my way. They're probably bad-mouthing me. Evan's parents tried to calm the situation, but no one was willing to listen. A groom cheating at the wedding venue on the day of the wedding is not something you normally hear of. Therefore, it was more plausible that it was a bride's ugly jealousy leading to slander. Evan's relatives pierced me with their glares like needles. Evan, who had been nervous, gained confidence.
Look, Emily, apologize to everyone for the trouble caused by your lying.
And then my mom stepped forward and apologized.
I apologize for calling you all here earlier than scheduled.
I stood beside my mother. But I'm not going to apologize as Evan wants.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on our special day. As a small token of our apology for the rush, we've prepared a special entertainment for you.
With a cue, the staff began guiding all the relatives to the banquet hall. Evan and Sarah followed behind the relatives, confused. In the hall, a giant screen was lowered. Please, take a look. In the dimly lit hall, a sultry voice suddenly filled the air. At the same moment, the intimate scenes of Evan and Sarah were projected on the giant screen. Screams erupted from all around. Sarah stood in front of the screen yelling, "Stop it. Turn it off." The scandalous affair was exposed for only a few seconds, but it made for the most exciting entertainment.
Now, I wonder who's lying.
I asked in the silent hall.
Sarah, do you intend to be the bride in that pure white dress? If you're saying that it's not my day to be the center of attention, then surely it must be yours, right?
Look, everyone's watching.
The stars today are you, Sarah, and Evan.
I started clapping, but the crowd remained frozen. Evan, with his face red as a beet, grabbed my collar without hesitation.
You! Don't mess with me. The one messing around is Evan.
I snapped back, and his grip loosened. As expected from a cute girl's sidekick. He can't stand up to the strong. Such a weak guy. I took a breath and asked gently.
Let me ask you again. What were you and Sarah doing in the dressing room?
Evan clenched his back teeth.
This secret filming, why?
Of course, there wasn't a hidden camera at the venue. The answer was simple.
I just filmed the dressing room with my smartphone. Huh? And I sent it to my mom.
Mom shook her smartphone to show it. If I confronted them alone about the affair, I'd likely be fooled by the bold Sarah. So, I secretly filmed their little rendezvous and sent it to my mom right away. My mom was quick to act. Having worked at the venue for many years, Mom had moved up from planner to manager, and she was adept at coordinating the staff. She swiftly gave directions to lock down Evan and his group, gather the relatives, and even started preparing the video and screen. Neither my mom nor I wanted to make the video public. This was a last resort. In case Evan and the others refused to admit their guilt.
You think you can film us secretly, expose us, and get away with it for free?
Evan said, his eyes brimming with tears, trying to bluff his way out. Then his mother slapped his cheek.
Stop this nonsense.
I had actually sent the video to his parents as well. They probably never imagined they'd be shown their son's true colors on his big day, as he was about to leave the nest. I thought they might defend Evan. But instead, they said,
let's gather the family and confront them in front of everyone.
That was our cue to take action. Evan and Sarah are relatives. Because they are family, his in-laws wanted to avoid ambiguity and made a tough decision.
My mom betrayed me.
Evan staggered back fearfully, clutching his chest as if he was about to hyperventilate.
You're the one who betrayed us, Evan.
His mother yelled, tears streaming down her face. Evan's cries were loud and grating. Everyone frowned and looked down on him from afar. In the midst of this, the other main character, Sarah, was trying to sneak away from the crowd. Even amidst the commotion, she stood out too much in her pure white outfit. A middle-aged relative nearby caught her right away.
Let me go, don't touch me.
Sarah protested, looking down. The middle-aged man raised his voice in desperation.
It's a lie that you were cheating with Evan, right? You love me, don't you?
Then, another man, grasping the situation, shouted, you were messing around with someone else besides me? Sarah, head still bowed, gave no reply. It seems Sarah wasn't just involved with Evan. It's unbelievable that she was involved with 3 relatives, all so close to her. Evan stopped crying and yelled at the men.
I'm special. I gave her like $1,500 every month.
Sarah's head spun, and she collapsed. Evan had just spilled the beans on something he shouldn't have. Following that, the other 2 men also confessed to giving Sarah money. In the end, it was all about the money for Sarah. The men who had been rivals for Sarah's affection suddenly teamed up.
You said you only loved me, but you lied.
Now, Sarah's enemies were Evan and the others. Surrounded by the encroaching men, Sarah trembled violently.
Help me!
Then, unbelievably, Sarah's eyes met mine. With everyone in the family looking at her with disgust, it seemed she couldn't even rely on her own parents in such a situation. She probably couldn't even bear to look her parents in the face. The attention-seeking Sarah. Everyone's looking at you now. Aren't you pleased? Sarah's face turned pale, and she rolled her eyes back, losing consciousness. Evan grabbed her arm and yelled.
Hey Sarah. We're not done talking. You cheater.
I tapped Evan on the shoulder from behind. You're not done talking to me, Mr. Cheater. I said with a sneer. Could this be a skit of some sort, I wondered? Evan is completely oblivious to the mess he's in. The color drained from his face as the reality of his situation hit him.
No, you've got it all wrong. It's not cheating. I don't love Sarah. It's you, Emily, that I love. It's like I was just visiting a professional, you know? I was just paying Sarah, that's all.
I put on my best smile and nodded, playing along. Evan, slightly relieved, began to relax his guard. Right.
You were buying Sarah's time with my money.
He looked up to the sky, still smiling faintly. When he mentioned transferring $1,500 to Sarah each month, it clicked. That was exactly the amount I had been giving him for our wedding savings. How could I forgive him for funneling our future happiness into his selfish desires?
Please, forgive me.
Evan looked at me with tearful eyes. Repulsive. I had the urge to stomp on his head but restrained myself. I didn't want to get my shoes dirty. In the end, we called off the wedding. Thankfully, we had mostly just invited relatives, so after the debacle, we sent them home. Breaking off the engagement with Evan was, of course, the only option. Thankfully, it was before we had legally tied the knot.
About this.
Even though I wanted nothing more to do with Evan, he came to me holding something.
We still have to pay for the wedding, even though it's cancelled. This is like highway robbery. Can you talk to your mother about it?
He presented a bill for around $40,000. Of course, we were liable for the full amount as it was the day of the wedding.
We could just pay it from our joint savings.
I offered generously.
But that was mostly relatives' money, right? We were gonna come out ahead with the gifts. I didn't think we needed any savings.
So you spent it on Sarah, I finished for him. To Sarah, Evan was normally not someone she'd consider dating. But with the wedding looming, she must have felt a sense of loss. It turned out she had seduced him.
Are you sure you want to marry such a plain Jane? Looks like you're set for a dull life. If you had money, at least you could have some fun with cute girls like me, she had teased him.
That's what got him to hand over that $1,500 he had on him. After that, their transactional relationship continued, both financially and physically.
It's your fault the wedding was ruined, so you should pay this.
I was about to retort angrily. But suddenly, Evan was out of sight. He had been floored by his father. Apparently, my in-laws had been suspicious of Evan and had followed him.
It was you who broke it.
His mother yelled what I had been feeling. My parents apologized profusely to me. Evan was dragged back home by my father-in-law. Later on, through a lawyer, I demanded compensation from both Evan and Sarah. The adorable Sana was apparently the idol of her relatives. Her parents doted on her as well. Even if their beloved daughter messed up, as long as money could solve the problem, her parents might have covered for her. But even they ran out of patience after the horrendous spectacle she displayed on the wedding day. Both of them had no savings, and they ended up borrowing money to pay me the compensation, as my in-laws informed me. Furthermore, both were kicked out of their parental homes. Evan, with no experience living alone, became stale and started to imagine everyone at work hated him, which led to his resignation, according to a mutual friend. And Sarah, hopping from friend's house to friend's house, was ostracized wherever she went for badmouthing me. Soon enough, she'd run out of places to go. Now that Evan and I were no longer engaged, they could be together openly, yet all they did was blame each other. They were suffering because of their own actions, not someone else's. Some time has passed since the incident, and I've been enjoying peaceful days. Ah, my life's over. I sighed, still saddened by the shattered dream of my perfect wedding.
What are you talking about?
My mom hit me on the back, snapping me out of it.
In your 30s? You're still young. Life's over if you just mope around at home. But outside, there's a whole lot of new happiness waiting for you.
Where could it be?
Let me think, the peak of Mount Everest. Or perhaps the Sahara Desert.
That's way too far.
What? Come on, let's go together.
My mom and I couldn't help but laugh. She's right, happiness must be out there somewhere. For starters, she's suggesting we hit the spa this weekend. Maybe she just wanted to take a trip with me?
No matter where you go, no matter what mistakes you make, you always have a home to return to, Emily.
She muttered softly and began to prepare for our spa trip right away. Always strong, always dependable, that's my mom. I realized I'm still protected by her. I haven't given up on the dream of marriage yet. I'll build a bright home and become a mom just like her.
Looks like a limited edition accessory. Why does my younger sister-in-law have something like this? More importantly, respect your own sister over some other woman, you stupid brother.
On the day of the wedding, during the spare time before the ceremony, I tried to calm my nerves by watching my cat through a pet camera. However, what the pet camera showed was not my beloved cat, but my dolled-up sister-in-law who was attending our wedding. Unaware of the pet camera in the room, she was freely rummaging through my personal belongings. When I showed this to my husband, he blew up like a hot water heater and charged into the room where his relatives were waiting. Broadcasting the live footage to the entire family, my sister-in-law was caught humming a tune while voicing her grievances about my husband and trying on my personal items. Upon seeing her outrageous behavior, my in-laws turned pale and rushed out in a hurry. Minutes later, a devastating comeuppance was in store for my sister-in-law, who thought she had not been caught and took bold actions. I have been working at the company I joined in my final year of university for 3 years. About 2 years after I started working, a male colleague, whom I began to regard as more than a friend, confessed his desire for a serious relationship with the intent of marriage. I accepted his proposal without hesitation. A year has passed since then, and we are now in full swing preparing for marriage. Our new home is located not far from my in-laws' place, and with the pretext of a wedding gift, both our parents contributed little by little, and we bought a pre-owned single-family home. The remaining amount of the purchase price was covered by a mortgage, but since both my husband and in-laws agreed I should keep working post-marriage, we were optimistic that working together would allow us to pay it off sooner. There was a reason for choosing a single-family home. I have an extraordinary love for cats, and I lived surrounded by several cats at my parents' home. When I decided to attend a university in another state and had to live alone, of course, I never considered parting from my cats. My parents strongly opposed me taking a cat with me to live alone, but I persuaded them by saying I would work part-time and take responsibility for it. In the end, I was only able to bring one cat from my parents' home, but I pride myself on not letting my cat feel deprived while I balanced my studies and part-time work. After graduation, I continued to live in the same pet-friendly apartment, but post-marriage, it was undeniable that the apartment was too small. I was very sad at the thought of possibly having to return my cat to my parents' house. To me, cats are almost like soulmates. Having my dear cat with me has allowed me to endure tough exams and overcome the loneliness of living alone for the first time. My husband was aware of my passion for cats even before we started dating, so he was okay with keeping a cat. However, it was challenging to find a pet-friendly apartment or condo. Finding a small space suitable for a single person wasn't too hard, but considering 2 adults and the possibility of children in the future, along with rent considerations, the search was proving difficult. One day, when we went to my in-laws' house for wedding introductions, I hit it off with my mother-in-law over our love of cats. My mother-in-law, though an in-law herself, was a local like my in-laws, so I thought she might have information on pet-friendly rentals and consulted with her. She was thrilled at the prospect of living with a cat and suggested, with much excitement, "Why don't you just buy a single-family home?" As it turns out, my mother-in-law loves cats and lived with them before marrying, but had to give up cohabiting with them after discovering my father-in-law's cat allergy. With this background and perhaps feeling a bit guilty, my father-in-law didn't argue against the idea and decided to help fund our home purchase. It didn't seem fair to rely only on my in-laws, so when I explained the situation to my parents, they offered to help for the sake of the cat. My father kept insisting it was strictly for the cat's benefit, but my mother told me, "He's just shy. Don't worry about it, it's a wedding gift," and shared a knowing smile. My dad has always been shy about expressing his true feelings, and it's not like he needed to be shy at a time like this, so my mother and I couldn't help but laugh together. Thus, with the help of our parents, we were able to settle on our new home much sooner than expected, and we decided to move before the wedding. My mother-in-law, who adores cats, is still in her youthful 50s. She works part-time on some days, takes up hobbies, and like clockwork, rejuvenates herself monthly at a cat cafe. Seeing how she's that kind of person, I thought our cat would warm up to her in no time. So I quickly invited her over to our new place, and to my surprise, our cat took to her more than I imagined, and she seemed to have a blast. Ever since then, she's been visiting frequently not just to play with the cat but also to share long-lasting recipes and secretly spill the beans on my husband's favorite dishes. She really goes out of her way, and it has made my relationship with her very good. My husband and I are already living together in our new home, so it feels like married life has already started, even though the wedding is still ahead. We work at the same company, but once our marriage was decided, my husband got transferred to another department. It seems he had already requested a transfer, so he's pretty pumped about moving to the department he wanted. Our work start times are the same, but we come home at different hours. Whoever gets home first starts preparing dinner, and I think we're doing quite well at splitting the household chores down the middle. During the commute, my husband often reads the newspaper because of his job, while I've made it a routine to check on our cat through the pet camera I installed at home. Even in the crowded train, getting soothed by my cat cuts my stress in half. It's just one good thing after another. The conversation might jump around a bit, but when I went to my husband's family home to formally introduce myself, the in-laws weren't the only ones I met for the first time. I had heard about his unmarried sister since we started dating. My sister-in-law is quite the free spirit, with a passion for international travel. Instead of holding down a regular job, she does various part-time gigs to save up for her trips. Seems like she's living the dream. I always thought it was great to have passions, and folks with their own interests tend to respect each other's and get along just fine. So her not having a 9-to-5 or being spontaneous wasn't a big deal to me. Truth be told, my own decision to work full-time was largely to keep up a lifestyle surrounded by cats. And the appeal of having paid leave in case something happened to them was not lost on me. You don't usually get that with part-time jobs. I'm pretty keen on traveling myself. Back when I lived at home, I went on a few international family trips. Learning about unknown worlds is always a plus, and I figured I'd get along with my sister-in-law just fine. My husband, however, gave me an earful about how naive my thinking was. He vented about all the troubles he's had because of her. Like how his money would magically shrink, or how she'd dip into the savings he'd built up from his own part-time work. Thinking his piggy bank was too vulnerable, he had his folks set him up with his own bank account. But even then, it seemed she'd somehow withdraw from it without his consent. Back in the day, he used easy-to-remember pins, which pretty much gave her free rein. He said it felt just like being robbed. He was pretty steamed up, maybe reliving those emotions, because she also had a habit of using and breaking his stuff without asking. They seemed to be on pretty bad terms. There didn't seem to be any lies in my husband's side of the story, and it didn't sound exaggerated, but I didn't want to take sides and sour my relationship with my sister-in-law before it even started. While I nodded along with my husband, inside, I was reminding myself to stay neutral. But, boy, the sister-in-law I met was nothing like the picture my husband painted. She was something else entirely. After the introductions and self-introductions were done, and we began to dig deeper over dinner with the in-laws, she started talking about her hobbies and was super easy to talk to. Despite the friction with my husband, I felt as a fellow woman, we could make it work. She's in her early 30s but seems to see the world through rose-colored glasses, probably due to her carefree lifestyle. Then again, some people don't show their true selves and put on a facade. Was she on guard around me? Or was she playing up the unreliable angle out of consideration? That's what I was thinking. However, as the warm and friendly atmosphere of the gathering reached its later stages, my in-laws formally addressed the start of our family relations with words of encouragement. My mother-in-law, drawing from her experience, mentioned that it's tough to balance work and unfamiliar household chores, so she encouraged us to support each other. Ever since my husband decided to support my career continuation, he confidently assured that he could handle the household chores, having learned the ropes from his mother, who in turn was a bit worried and asked, "Really? If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask," they said, and the meet and greet for our wedding should have ended on a good note. That is, until my sister-in-law, oblivious to the mood, chimed in. "Both of you working means you'll be rolling in dough, right? You'll be saving up for a rainy day, huh? If I end up single and an old lady, you'll use that savings to take care of me, right? So, if I never marry, you guys have got my back," she said. The idea was that we should manage on my husband's salary alone, and save my entire paycheck so that if my sister-in-law never married and became elderly, we would use that money to support her. I was stunned. It took me a moment to comprehend what she had said, and I was at a loss for words. But my husband instantly got it. "Are you kidding me? Why should we care about your retirement when you've chosen to live your life without planning for it?" he snapped back. He made it clear that her disrespectful comment was none of our business and firmly put her in her place. The in-laws, too, were too flustered to laugh off such a remark and sent her out of the room, apologizing to us for her rudeness. After this incident, I consciously avoided any interaction with my sister-in-law. I believe everyone is free to choose their own path in life. But who would ask someone they've only met for a few hours to take care of them in their old age? Considering what my husband told me about his sister using his money and wages from his part-time jobs at will, I now felt she was targeting my income. She seemed all too eager to come to us with her hands out, and I couldn't bring myself to like her. She easily trampled over my intention to bridge the gap and get along well. Even if she said it was just a joke to lighten the mood, the atmosphere had already been pleasant, and such a tasteless joke isn't funny. She was just an immature child who couldn't read the room. Even after her outrageous outburst, I arranged to visit my in-laws' home when I knew my sister-in-law would be out working part-time. Thus, from the time of our initial meeting until the day of our wedding, I never saw her face again. Until the very end, my husband refused to let his sister attend the wedding. I understood his feelings, as I too didn't want any strange outbursts or behavior at our wedding. However, worried about what she might do if she wasn't invited, I convinced my husband that it would be better to have her there under someone's watchful eye. He reluctantly agreed to my suggestion. Frankly, I was also nervous about what she might do in front of my parents, relatives, and friends. The in-laws said they'd keep a close eye on her, so I had to trust that. But my sister-in-law managed to mess everything up with her outrageous actions. It wasn't just about us anymore. She had created a situation that involved the in-laws and all the relatives. After my husband and I arrived at the venue and changed in our respective dressing rooms, he came to mine. He was in a light-colored vest and morning suit, while I wore a white wedding dress that showed off my shoulders and back. The dress and veil were too long for me to move around on my own. It would be selfish of me to ask him to stay because I felt lonely since he had greetings to make with his work colleagues. So I was really happy when he came to my dressing room. The time until the start of the wedding ceremony also served as a solid time filler for me. It's not so much killing time, it has become a part of my daily routine. That meant checking on our beloved cat through the pet camera and getting that warm, fuzzy feeling. When my husband came in, I was just about to look through the camera on my phone. He had become quite the cat lover since we started living with one. "Do you want to watch together?" I asked, and he told me to go ahead. Apparently, he wasn't used to the morning suits he was wearing, and it seemed like that was the least of his concerns. Taking advantage of my husband's kindness, I peeked into the pet camera, but what was displayed was not my beloved cat, but my sister-in-law. We had received a message from my mother-in-law while we were moving to the venue. The gist of it was that she was going to bring my sister-in-law to the venue now. We had agreed to keep each other posted so my sister-in-law wouldn't cause trouble for other guests. My mother-in-law had assured us that since they were driving, there'd be no unsupervised actions, so we were at ease, but what was this all about? I called out to my husband loudly. At that moment, still unaware of the gravity of the situation, my husband naively remarked that I didn't need to shout to be heard. But he was speechless after seeing the live feed from the pet camera. Uncharacteristically, he let out a few expletives. It was clear his anger was too intense to contain. Then he spun on his heel and stormed out of the dressing room. I followed him in a hurry. Considering I was likely to trip in my heels, I kicked them off. Even if it looked undignified, I took off the meticulously set veil and boldly lifted the hem of my dress to run. My husband headed straight into the family's waiting room. To give the out-of-town family a comfortable place to rest, instead of the usual waiting room, a room spacious enough for a small banquet had been prepared. Thanks to its size, the room came with a large installed screen. When I caught up to my husband, the entire family was taken aback, not understanding his actions. He was saying something to his parents, but his anger was so intense that the subject of his sentences was missing. Noticing I had caught up, he asked to borrow my smartphone. With my phone, he projected the live feed from the pet camera onto the big screen. and turned up the volume so everyone in the corner could hear. The screen showed my sister-in-law humming a tune while rummaging around the room. At first, my husband's relatives thought it was some kind of skit, watching her behavior with dismay. There were even some murmurs of exasperation about how she had always been one to do outrageous things. But the moment my sister-in-law began to rant about my husband to the tune of her humming, the atmosphere in the room turned icy.
He's shutting out his own sister. What's up with that guy? Having tea with my sister-in-law isn't such a big deal, right? Of course, the tabs on my gainfully employed sister-in-law.
She also said, "Remember when my brother gave his wife that fancy engagement ring? And sometimes he buys trendy jewelry. I bet that was all for me." Muttering to herself that I shouldn't need the accessories I used to wear when I was single, my sister-in-law meticulously rummaged through my dresser. She even said she'd cash in anything that didn't suit her or looked valuable. I had given my mother-in-law a spare key so she could play with the cat anytime. Knowing this, my sister-in-law, who had been banned from our house, took advantage of my mother-in-law's absence during the wedding to sneak in and look for valuables. Upon understanding the situation, my in-laws immediately stood up, their faces pale, and apologized to me. When we got to the venue, my sister-in-law excused herself to use the restroom. Regardless of whether my sister-in-law needed to be watched all the way to the restroom, anyone would think that if you bring someone to a venue, they would behave. My husband and I, along with my in-laws, never thought my sister-in-law would do something so drastic as to head to the venue. We assumed we'd be notified when she arrived. Who would have thought that on the very day of her own brother's wedding, she would sneak into our house to commit theft? My in-laws did apologize again, emphasizing that stopping my sister-in-law's actions was the priority, and with that, my father-in-law sprinted out of the waiting room. My mother-in-law followed him. The relatives on my husband's side seemed unable to grasp the situation. Maybe they were struggling to organize their feelings, terrified that a criminal might emerge from the family. Oblivious to the relatives' awareness, my sister-in-law, upon finding branded accessories in my dresser, tried them on, checking herself in the mirror with a satisfied smile and even checking their resale value on her phone. The relatives left in the waiting room began to grumble complaints about my sister-in-law's behavior and their growing distrust towards the in-laws who had raised her. They questioned the upbringing, suggesting that being a freeloader and single past 30 led to this behavior. Regarding this, I think it's questionable whether my husband should apologize. From the beginning, he doesn't care about the opinions of relatives, and it seems he is thinking about how to make his sister atone for her foolish actions. I could tell he was desperately trying to control his anger as he clenched his fist over and over. I felt anger and disbelief, but I was convinced that my sister-in-law and I were fundamentally different people. Talking to a person like that is just a waste of time. Even if they suffer a setback, they'll just sleep it off and completely forget about it by the next day. They don't learn from their mistakes nor have any intention of growing. They're nothing but the dregs of society, only capable of thinking about how to get through life the easy way. I swore that even if my husband or in-laws groveled and begged me for forgiveness, I would never let her in. But I doubt my husband would want that anyway. About 10 minutes after the in-laws had stormed out, the live video took a dramatic turn. As my sister-in-law was engrossed in her search, my father-in-law lunged into the room. Before she could turn around at the sound of the door swinging open, she was suddenly grabbed from behind, completely taken aback.
"What are you doing here in my son and daughter-in-law's home, which you're banned from?"
Her face was clearly shaken. Our new home wasn't equipped with security measures. It seemed like she had done her homework, knowing this. She must have found a way to snoop around without the in-laws' watchful eyes, knowing well enough that my mother-in-law had a spare key. But it looked like she hadn't thought about what would happen if she got caught. She was stumbling over her words, trying to make excuses. I was asked by my sister-in-law. "Look, I even found the jewelry as proof, right?" Then, trailing behind, my mother-in-law entered the room. Holding a smartphone, she loudly exclaimed that she had to report the illegal entry to the police.
"Why would I ask you, someone who's banned? And why are you wearing the jewelry that you claim she asked for?"
My sister-in-law's weak excuses were met with solid arguments from my mother-in-law, and as my sister-in-law looked for a chance to escape, my father-in-law pinned her down with his full weight. She was complaining that she was in pain, that she would suffocate to death, but my father-in-law firmly told her that if she had the strength to shout, she wasn't going to die. Right then, the police arrived, having been notified. My sister-in-law was taken away as a trespasser, but she kept resisting, repeating, "Just because I entered a family member's home, that's trespassing? Are the police here idiots?" My mother-in-law informed her that all the evidence was there, and that the entire family had seen it happen in real time, revealing the existence of the pet camera. When my sister-in-law saw the bedroom camera, she seemed to admit her defeat and was quietly led away by the police. I breathed a sigh of relief at that sight. I hadn't thought the in-laws would hand her over to the police, but I was grateful that they imposed a proper sanction. Yet, the fact that the criminal act of a real sister was exposed made it complicated to feel simply happy about it. Even if they hated each other and didn't get along, they were still siblings, and I believed that he must have his own thoughts about it. The relatives' room on my husband's side was in uproar. To think that a criminal had emerged from the family, some were disappointed, while others openly expressed their anger as a disgrace to the family. Amidst this, the in-laws who had handed my sister-in-law over to the police returned. Naturally, the wedding could not proceed under these circumstances and was, of course, cancelled. There were people who had traveled long distances to celebrate with us, and others who had finally managed to clear their schedules to be there. Feelings of regret and a wish for understanding intermingled within me. My in-laws quickly sensed how I felt and repeatedly bowed their heads to us, apologizing for the turn of events. The mother-in-law blamed herself for not keeping a better eye on her daughter, apologizing to us repeatedly. She also stood silently, taking in the furious remarks from the entire family, for having brought such a disgrace upon them, and kept apologizing endlessly. Having heard that the groom's side was in chaos, my parents, worried, peeked into the room. Seeing the in-laws apologizing to the groom's family, they realized something was seriously wrong and asked me for an explanation. I could say that my sister-in-law had broken into our new home to steal, but I didn't know how much they would believe. Then, noticing my parents were there, my in-laws came over and, without any explanation, apologized to my parents. When the in-laws revealed what their daughter had done, my parents' expressions grew complicated. My husband knew his sister had issues, but he had no idea she was this foolish. Along with his parents, he apologized to mine. Despite him being a victim too. But neither my parents nor I could simply say don't worry about it, and a heavy, indescribable silence hung in the air. After gathering their thoughts, my parents said they'd leave future decisions up to us, but they did agree to cancel the wedding, and for the time being, that settled things. Later on, my sister-in-law got off with just a fine because it was her first offense and she hadn't actually stolen anything. If she had been caught after rifling through the new house, theft would have been added to her charges, and she wouldn't have gotten off with just a fine. My husband bitterly said she should have been arrested for theft and spent some time in jail. I was slightly in agreement, not wanting anything to do with her going forward. Though my sister-in-law got off with a fine, she now had a criminal record, and the in-laws severely scolded her for breaking into someone's house while they were away, even if she was family. My daughter would know right from wrong well past the age of 30. My father-in-law raged to the point I thought his veins might pop, and I heard he disowned her right then and there. She had to pay for all wedding-related expenses, including those incurred from the cancellation. My sister-in-law, who had blown through all her part-time job earnings, was forced to borrow from every lender out there to cover the costs. Of course, some lenders were reputable while others were shady, skirting the edges of the law, and now she faced a future of hard work and being hounded by debt collectors. Unable to accept this series of events, my sister-in-law took to social media to vent her frustrations and seek validation, but instead, she ignited a firestorm of criticism. Her photo, real name, and criminal record were spread all over the internet, and a search would bring up those details. She later deleted her posts, but someone had saved the logs, and her rants never really disappeared from the internet. Even when she created new social media accounts, she was quickly found out, ensuring that her criminal past would follow her. She was fired from her previous part-time job because having a criminal worked there could tarnish the establishment's reputation, and she was let go from other jobs after being outed by coworkers who knew of her infamy. She's currently scraping by, working in physically demanding jobs like construction, barely making her debt payments. It's said that resuming her hobby of traveling abroad is almost impossible now. After all that settled down, we had a small, intimate wedding with just close friends and family. It was a DIY wedding with colleagues and friends, but it was filled with love and will be a cherished memory for life. We've adopted a new cat and are spending our happy days surrounded by the kitty and kind-hearted people. Why is there a person buried in the garden? What? After taking a moment to comprehend, I reflexively covered my daughter's mouth. Of all things, she had to speak up in a situation like this. Today was a joyous day, celebrating the new house. If my daughter said something out of line and embarrassed Ruby, I had no idea what she might do to her. My brother's words echoed in my head, "Ruby has a temper." For a moment, I thought it was all over, but somehow, I managed to smooth things over. Later, we enjoyed a pleasant time, and I began preparing to head home with my parents. My daughter was crouched in front of the flower bed, talking to something. Curious, I slowed my pace and ran over to her side. Then, in the next instant, I saw Ruby swinging a baseball bat down hard towards my daughter's head. "Sarah." I reached out desperately. I am Yvonne, 35 years old. I live with my 5-year-old daughter, Sarah. My husband, who is the same age as me, is currently working away, and we only meet a few times a year. Even if it's for work, it's lonely. Luckily, my parents' house is close to our place. Just about a 5-minute drive away. Because of this, my daughter and I often visit my parents. They adore Sarah and always welcome us. But there were a couple of issues when visiting my parents' house. First, there's this problem. "Yvonne, you're here again? Isn't that too often? There's no point in you being married off." "My bad." Those sharp words came from Ruby, my sister-in-law. Not only my parents, but also my older brother and his wife, who is my sister-in-law, were living in the family home. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement. As my brother, Eugene, had bought a plot of land and was in the middle of building a new house. So until it was finished, they were staying at my parents' place. "Even if your husband's away, don't you think you're leaning on your parents too much?" Ruby, a year older than me, might not be a bad person, but she was assertive and a bit snide. That's why I've disliked her ever since she was dating my brother. Honestly, even now that they're married, I don't understand what my brother sees in her. I never understood why she was so hard on me, her sister-in-law. Moreover, she didn't seem to like children much, especially having it in for my daughter. "Grandma, let's play." As Sarah took my mother's hand and started bouncing, Ruby made an obviously displeased face. "Oh, it's so exhausting when Sarah comes over because she's so noisy. Yvonne, you really should discipline her more. It'll cause problems in the future." Such remarks made me feel uncomfortable. I only came because Sarah wanted to see her grandparents, but every time, Ruby's words gave me a headache. The second issue was about my daughter, Sarah. She has a strange ability to see things not visible to ordinary people and to sense certain things. At first, we couldn't believe it. But when we found lost items exactly where she said they would be, among other slightly eerie incidents, we started to believe. This was a family secret. So, we had kept it hidden from Ruby. I never imagined it would come out in such a way. The long cohabitation was finally coming to an end. My brother and his wife's new house was finished. They were going to move out immediately. I've been looking forward to this. Living together was tough. Ruby whispered to me, and I could only give a wry smile. It wasn't just tough for her. I was relieved that my parents' home was finally going to be a place of peace. My daughter looked at me curiously. "Mom, why do you act properly in front of Ruby? You're so laid back with Grandma and Eugene." Well, you see. You know, Eugene and I grew up together, but Ruby just recently became part of our family through marriage. My daughter didn't seem convinced. Sorry, was that confusing? No, I got it. But it's a shame, isn't it? A shame? As I cocked my head, Sarah nodded affirmatively. It's such a shame. We finally became a family, and now we're gonna be separated again soon.
What?
When Sarah speaks with such conviction, it's frighteningly believable. Separated. Could it be that Eugene and his wife are going to divorce? While it would be a relief for me, I'd feel sorry for Eugene if he were to be upset. After all, they've just finished building their new house, and now to think they could divorce so soon. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. So I just made Sarah promise not to talk about it elsewhere and decided not to dwell on it. Sometime after Eugene and his wife moved, we were invited to their house. For the housewarming, we wrapped a nice sum of money as a gift, and the 5 of us, including my parents, Sarah, and myself, headed over. Eugene's house was about a 20-minute drive from our parents' place. Since my compact car is too small for 5 of us, we had to ask my father to drive his car. It was an old manual transmission, which made me nervous, but my father's a safer driver than I am, so it should be fine. To me, not being able to drive a stick shift, that's pretty impressive. When we arrived, the first thing that struck me was the sheer beauty of the place. A brand new build, indeed. The exterior alone was overwhelming. The yard was spacious, and there was even a brand new flower bed near the bay window. There weren't any flowers planted yet, just soil, but it was impressive nonetheless.
Wow! It's so big!
Sarah was gleefully running around the yard, shrieking with delight.
Hey! Sarah!
As I attempted to chase after her, Eugene stopped me. Let her be. If she wants to play in the big yard, that's fine. Oh, thanks. Taking Eugene's word for it, I halted. I kept an eye on Sarah to make sure she didn't stray too far. As long as she was in the yard, she wouldn't get lost or bother anyone. I found myself idly thinking how nice it would be to have a house. That's when Ruby came over, glaring sharply at us from a distance.
Hey! Yvonne! You should be watching Sarah properly.
Oh. Did she do something? Sarah had been running around, but she hadn't bumped into anything or broken anything. I didn't recall anything that should have caused an upset, but Ruby was angry.
Do you normally let kids run wild at someone's housewarming? Don't you think it's bothersome?
My apologies. Eugene said it was okay, so I just went with it.
That's just Eugene being too nice to say anything. Don't take it to heart.
I couldn't afford to upset Ruby any further. I had seen Eugene getting tossed around by Ruby's tantrums many times before. Sorry about that. I'll make sure she behaves. I went after Sarah, who had just darted past.
Sarah!
Chasing after her, I found her squatting by the flower bed, staring intently at the flower bed. All that meets the gaze is dirt. No flowers have bloomed yet. What could be so interesting? Sarah? What are you doing? When I call out from above, my daughter looks up at me and says, "Why is there a person buried in the garden?"
What?
After a moment to grasp what she said, I reflexively covered my daughter's mouth. Of all things, she had to say it here. It was housewarming for my brother and his wife. It's supposed to be a happy occasion, but if Sarah says something out of line, it could smear mud on Ruby's face. And if that happens, who knows what Ruby would do to her? Ruby has a temper, my brother's words come to mind. It seems my brother heard, but luckily, Ruby is engrossed in conversation with Mom and hasn't noticed. Look, Sarah. What a pretty house, isn't it beautiful? Let's go inside. I catch my brother's eye, his face a mix of emotions, and try to distract my daughter as we move. Of course, my hand remains over her mouth. But without any concern for my efforts, Sarah wriggles her face out from between my fingers and says,
Hey, Mom. It's weird. Why aren't we helping the person buried in the garden? Sarah. It's fine. I'm gonna ask Eugene.
Sarah slips away and runs to my brother. Grabbing his hand, she pulls him toward the flower bed. Seeing the expression on my brother's face, who knows Sarah's strength, is telling.
Sarah. Do you see something?
Reaching the flower bed, Sarah looks up at my brother and tilts her head.
Yeah. Eugene, don't you see? We have to help them quickly. They're asking for help, calling Ruby's name.
This was unexpected for both my brother and me, and we inadvertently looked at each other. Ruby is still talking with Mom.
Ruby's name? Yeah, right here.
My brother and I step closer to the flower bed. On closer inspection, the soil where Sarah is pointing looks slightly different in color. It's as if someone had dug it up once before. Chills run down my spine as the thought crosses my mind.
What do we do, Eugene? What to do? We can't just ignore what Sarah says.
It's not that we should ignore it because it's a child's words, but because it's Sarah's words that we can't. My brother returns with a small gardening spade from the back of the house. It seems insufficient for digging, but it's all we have. When we tap the soil, it feels unnaturally hard, as if something has been firmly packed to hide it. My brother, perhaps frightened, is cautious and can't put much force into the spade. Impatient, Sarah snatches the spade from him.
Come on, Eugene. You're no good at this. I will do it. Sarah, hang on.
I reach out to stop her, but Ruby grabs Sarah's wrist before I can. Having come over unnoticed, Ruby squats down to Sarah's level and smiles brightly.
Hey, Sarah, don't touch my precious flower garden.
Relieved at Ruby's smiling face, I pulled my daughter Sarah closer.
That's right, Sarah. You can't just touch things without permission. Sorry, Ruby.
No problem. But don't touch it again.
Not ever.
I felt a strange intensity coming from Ruby. I bowed my head to her again and tried to make a getaway to my mother Yvonne with Sarah in tow. But at that moment, Sarah once again pointed at the flower bed and shouted.
Look! That person is watching Ruby over there. Hey! Sarah! You're gonna scare Ruby with that kind of talk. Don't say things like that.
Every time my daughter had said something like this before, the people who heard it turned pale and trembled. I imagined Ruby must be terrified, having such things said about our brand new home.
Sorry, Ruby, it's just a misunderstanding by Sarah.
Trying to make amends, I looked at Ruby's face. No matter how much I might dislike Ruby, I felt bad for frightening her. I thought I had to get my brother Eugene to smooth things over too. But when I saw Ruby's face, I caught my breath. Far from looking scared, her eyes were wide open and she looked angry.
Sarah, is someone watching me? Yeah! They're asking for Ruby's help.
Ruby just said, huh, and raised the corners of her mouth. Her eyes weren't smiling at all. For some reason, I found Ruby's face terrifying and I shuddered.
I'm sorry, Ruby.
It's okay. It's just kid stuff. Eugene quickly stepped in between me and Ruby, and the situation settled for the moment. We went inside the brand new house with our parents and they let us sit on the brand new couch.
Wow! It's so cushy!
It seemed Sarah's spirits had lifted in the new house as she happily sank into the couch. She seemed to have completely forgotten the earlier incident, and I felt relieved. We then ordered some takeout sushi, chatting and eating. Sarah must have been exhausted from all the excitement. Before we knew it, she'd fallen asleep on the couch.
Would you like to put her to bed upstairs?
Should Eugene carry her?
Really? Thank you. That would be good. We still have quite a while before we head back.
It might be better than letting her sleep in the bustling living room. At first, I thought so, but then I had a bad feeling.
I think it's okay. She might feel lonely waking up alone. Oh, she's already 5, right?
She'll be fine.
She can sleep here.
Yvonne, you're a bit overprotective, huh? Ruby murmured that and smoothly rejoined the conversation with my brother and parents. Despite the short exchange, I couldn't stop sweating. After a while, Sarah woke up.
It's about time to leave.
We agreed with our dad and started to get ready to go home. As I was cleaning up the table and washing the cups, my bored daughter tugged on my clothes.
Hey Mom, are we going yet? Just a bit longer, okay? We'll leave soon. You're slow.
Maybe it's because she just woke up, but Sarah seemed a bit cranky. I didn't want to deal with a tantrum right now, so I decided to hand it over to my mother.
Mom, can you please rinse these? Sarah is getting grumpy.
My mother came running over, but Ruby blocked her.
Then how about Sarah and I play in the yard while we wait? The yard! Let's go!
My daughter, thrilled at the thought of going outside. More than that, I was surprised that Ruby invited her to play. She isn't supposed to like kids, yet there I was, puzzled but thankful.
Thanks, Ruby. But we're about to head home.
It's just until you leave. It's fine. Come on, let's go, Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah cheerfully responded and took Ruby's hand and they left.
It's strange. Ruby's not keen on children,
Eugene said with a stunned face, watching them go.
I know, right?
Ruby and my daughter have met many times, but I've never seen them play together. Sarah isn't shy with strangers and would happily approach Ruby, but I thought Ruby always kept her distance. Yet today, Ruby was the one who did the inviting. Something didn't sit right with me.
I'm gonna go outside too.
I rushed out in a hurry. Sarah was squatting in front of the flower bed, talking about something. Ruby was nowhere in sight. Curious, I slowed down my pace and ran over to her. The next moment, I saw Ruby swing a baseball bat at Sarah's head with all her might. It was a close call. I grabbed my daughter's arm and we both fell backwards. A metallic clang echoed through the yard. The bat had struck right where Sarah had been just seconds before. Hearing the sound, Eugene and my parents came outside.
What was that noise? Ruby?
Eugene, seeing Ruby holding the bat, was shocked. My heart pounding, I hugged Sarah tightly. That was too close. If I had been a moment later, Sarah could have. Silently, I looked up at Ruby. Her expression was angry or maybe emotionless.
What happened?
Eugene asked, suspicious.
Ruby, she tried to hit Sarah with a bat. What? I can't believe it.
Eugene stepped closer to Ruby in disbelief.
Is it true? Ruby, why would you?
Ruby just smirked. Come on, Yvonne. It was just a joke. Anger flooded over me and I snapped back.
A joke? What are you talking about? If that had hit her, do you have any idea what would have happened? It wouldn't have been just an injury.
As I was speaking, I realized something horrific. The end of the baseball bat was stained with something dark red. Noticing my gaze, Ruby let out a breath.
Sarah was the one who started it, wasn't she? She shouldn't have said what she did. What?
Before my eyes were involuntarily drawn to the flower bed. Could it really be that beneath there was a person buried, just as my daughter had said? Fear made my teeth chatter. My brother, concerned, kept me and Sarah away from Ruby.
What's this all about, Ruby?
It's nothing serious, just a joke. Maybe I went a little too far. My brother stared at Ruby for a moment and then decisively went to the back of the yard. He grabbed a small shovel and began to dig up the flower bed that Sarah had pointed out earlier.
Hey! Eugene, what are you doing?
Ruby tried to stop him, but she was no match for my brother's strength. He kept on digging. When he had dug a fair amount, he was speechless and clutched his head. Ruby also collapsed weakly beside him.
Eugene? Yvonne, call the cops. After that, just hurry, get Sarah and go home.
From my brother's unusual demeanor, I realized that my daughter's words were indeed true. My brother had found something that Sarah had mentioned. I immediately called the police. Surprisingly, Ruby was subdued until the police arrived. She was repeating "it's all over" as if in a daze, but she didn't become furious or try to run away. After the police arrived, I decided to stay with my brother while leaving my daughter with my parents. My mother was too scared to accompany him. My father offered to stay, but then we would be without a driver. My brother said, "I'm okay alone," but that couldn't be true. I couldn't leave my brother by himself.
Sarah, listen to Grandma and Grandpa and wait here, okay? Okay. Mommy, take care of Eugene, too.
Sure. I couldn't tell how much my daughter understood, but I promised her with a smile. My brother seemed to be talking calmly with the officer. I watched from a corner of the yard so as not to be in the way. Suddenly, Ruby's voice rose in anger.
I've told you. I don't know anything.
All right.
For now, let's go to the office and you can tell us everything there. You're just trying to pin this on me. I refuse to go.
The officer looked perplexed by Ruby's outburst. A female officer tried to grab Ruby's arm, but she shook her off and hid behind my brother.
Eugene, help me. Ruby.
My brother was flustered, holding Ruby's shoulder. He neither hugged her nor pushed her away. I could feel his conflict.
I didn't do anything wrong. It's a false accusation.
My brother probably wanted to believe Ruby's words. But just a moment ago, Ruby had swung a baseball bat at Sarah. Probably because if what was buried was revealed, she'd have trouble sealing the deal.
Ruby, if you're innocent, let's just go to the office for now, I suggested.
Ruby glared at me sharply.
No. What if the cops force a confession out of me? Tell that to Eugene. Well, that's...
My brother is probably still half in doubt. He just can't seem to turn Ruby away.
But, in reality, it was buried. Just by chance, right? It just happened to be someone buried there. We just unluckily bought this place. It's none of our business.
Hearing Ruby's words, I grabbed my brother's arm and involuntarily pulled him towards me.
Ruby, how do you know about this?
Huh?
Because Sarah told us.
I shook my head slightly.
Sarah only said there was a person there. She didn't mention any gender or age.
Ruby's mouth fell open in a small O, and her face turned pale. We hadn't been told by the police what had been buried yet. So, the only person who would know was the one who buried it.
But, just when I'm about to finally be happy, he had to come and ruin everything. All I wanted was to live a peaceful life with Eugene.
Ruby looked up at my brother pleadingly. My brother, holding Ruby's shoulders, shook his head in anguish.
I'm sorry, but this is just too much to handle. But you said you loved me.
I'm sorry. Ruby was trembling.
It was so close. I was so close to living as a classy homemaker in our new home.
Her hysterical screaming was frightening. Ruby was then taken away by the police. All I could do was silently stroke my brother's back as he shook with sobs. Later, we got a shocking call from the police. The person buried was Ruby's cheating partner. They had been involved for years, and he had provided financial support. When he learned of Ruby's upcoming marriage, he tried to interfere.
Give me back all the money I've spent on you, or I'll tell your husband everything.
That's what he threatened. In a panic and not wanting to be exposed, Ruby acted rashly. The flower bed had just been refilled with soft soil, making it an easy place to bury something. Ruby must have thought it safer to keep the body within sight rather than risking discovery in the mountains. Naturally, Ruby was arrested. My brother debated waiting for her to reform, but ultimately, they divorced. He couldn't forgive her for almost harming Sarah as well. He was devastated for a while, but slowly began to return to his old self. Unfortunately, he decided to sell the new house. But it was hard to sell due to its history. He kept thanking his daughter. If Sarah hadn't noticed, who knows what would have happened. Ruby certainly wouldn't have confessed. My brother joked self-deprecatingly about his poor judgment in women. Now, he has moved back into our parents' house. I visit every weekend, and they seem to be getting along well. This time it was all thanks to Sarah's sharp eye, but we'd had enough. So, we made a pact not to talk about seeing anything or anyone around others. She promised cheerfully. But as a parent, I hope her peculiar ability fades over time.
Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, take me there.
I begged my husband, tears streaming down my face. I had just received a call that my mother was in critical condition, unconscious after a traffic accident. But when I told my husband, he said, "I can't, I'm off on a trip with my colleague," and rejected my pleas. Even as I persisted, he seemed to mock me with a sneer. To me, the trip is more important. Attending someone's bedside is a waste of time. I'm definitely not going. My name is Erica, I'm 29. I married Ken, a year my senior, 2 years ago, and we both work full-time. We met at college. There were many classmates, so it was hard to talk to everyone, but we got closer after sitting next to each other at a party one day. We also discovered we both were only children raised by single mothers after losing our fathers early, which brought us closer quickly. We started going out often, and it naturally led to a relationship. As we both settled into our jobs after graduating from college, Ken proposed. We're both satisfied with our careers, so we haven't thought about children yet. We have talked about buying a house when the time comes. We're currently renting a place, and both of our homes are nearby. Since both of our fathers passed away, our mothers live alone. My mother, Sally, and my mother-in-law, Mary, get along very well. They got along because they were close in age and had raised their children on their own without remarrying. They became friends, often having coffee and traveling together. I was surprised because I never expected them to get so close, but it's great seeing them happy as they seem to have a lot of fun together. Mary treats me well too. However, Ken seems to dislike that Mary prioritizes my mother over him. He has a strong attachment to his mother. Before marriage, I knew he cherished his mother from his behavior. I was also brought up in a single-parent household, so I can understand his feelings. After getting married and starting living together, I saw his true nature. Once, when my mother sent a picture of her having lunch with Mary. The message said, "I'm having lunch with Mary now," and a picture of the two of them smiling was attached, and I remember naturally smiling as well. "Hey, Ken, it looks like your moms are having lunch right now." "Look, they sent me a photo," I said, and showed the image to Ken, who was just at home, but as soon as he saw it, he was in a good mood. It got so bad that I clicked my tongue.
Is this some kind of spite? What did you say?
I didn't know he disliked my mother then. It was true that Ken often didn't talk much in front of his mother, but I thought that was because he was nervous because he had only been married for a short time. I never imagined that he would shun my mother just because she was on good terms with his own mother.
Because of that person, my mother has been turning down my invitations to dinner lately. I've been telling her that she has plans with Sally. Don't you know that your mother should be a little more reserved?
I had no idea that Ken was thinking such a thing, and I was shocked to hear him say something bad about my mother. My mother-in-law apparently realized early on that Ken hated my mother. Mary realized Ken's feelings early and scolded him during dinner when he was being sarcastic to my mother.
"Ken, what's this attitude towards Sally? Stop it."
"What's this? Mom always supports this person. You've always said that I'm your precious son. It's funny how you prioritize someone you've recently become friends with over your own son." Ken retorted, saying, "I'm sure not, but to be honest, I couldn't help but think that his obsession with his mother-in-law was abnormal." Later, Mary apologized to me and my mother when Ken wasn't around.
"I might have spoiled him too much.
I'm sorry."
Mary, there's no need to be worried. I don't either. Ken really loves you."
My mother, calm by nature, so she doesn't usually get angry at people. This time as well, she pretended to understand Ken without blaming him, but I quickly realized that she was actually hurt in her heart. Ken's attitude worsened, criticizing my mother every chance he got. He has never openly attacked his mother because his stepmother protects her. However, whenever my mother and mother-in-law seemed to be getting along well, she complained to me, and eventually started saying bad things about my mother on a daily basis. Early in our second year of marriage, we had a huge fight. After the argument, the problem was never resolved, and since then, our relationship became strained, and we spoke less. Lately, Ken's been coming home late and going out alone on weekends. When I asked, he said it's just work and needs to work more time, but something felt off. Even when he said that, I wasn't very convinced and couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort. Then, one Sunday, when we were both off, Ken was packing for something. Apparently, there is no day off work today. As I was about to ask Ken why he was packing, a call came through on my smartphone. An unknown number displayed on the screen, and with curiosity, I answered only to find out it was the police on the line. They confirmed I was Sally's daughter and then dropped the bombshell. "Your mother has been in a traffic accident." My mind went blank. "My mom!" They told me she had been taken to the hospital in critical condition, unconscious. After getting the hospital's name, my shaking hands managed to end the call. Tears flooded as I struggled to think, but knew I needed to get to the hospital. Without a driver's license, I pleaded with Ken to take me. "Ken, it's awful. Mom's been in an accident. She's at the hospital. Please, we need to go now." But Ken just turned a disgusted face towards me. "Huh? I've got a trip with my colleague now, I'll miss the gathering time." "Deal with it yourself," he firmly refused. "A trip? I had no idea it was today." I realized why he was packing, but he hadn't informed me at all. He then floored me by saying the trip was for 2 weeks. "You can't be serious. Mom might." "Quiet down, the trip is more important to me. Besides, your mom's just an unrelated old woman to me. Visiting her would be a waste of time, I'm not going." Ken mocked me with his cruel words. "Get away, I'm busy, and I got a plane to catch," he said, pushing past me, humming as he packed his clothes into his suitcase. Furious, I yelled, "You're the worst. Just do whatever you want," and stormed out to take a taxi to the hospital. Ken left for his trip as planned. He had no idea of the crisis unfolding around me during the trip. I tried calling him repeatedly to no avail, and the 2 weeks passed without any contact. 2 weeks later, Ken came home in high spirits. I greeted him with a cold stare. "I have to go give my mom a souvenir now. I wonder if she's doing well." He cheerfully talked about visiting his mom with souvenirs, but I silently agreed to go with him to his mother's house. On the way, he joyfully talked about the gifts he bought. Not a word about my mom's accident. When they arrived at my in-laws' house, Ken stopped them as they were about to open the front door. "Huh? Why is it locked?" Arriving at a locked front door puzzled him. His mom didn't usually lock it when home. "Is Mom out?" he mumbled. Pushing past him, I used the spare key I had to open the door. "Why do you have the house keys?" Ken looked suspicious, but I didn't respond. Ken, entering before me, tilted his head as he couldn't find his mom. Stopping him from heading to the living room, I directed him. "Not that way. Come this way," I said, leading Ken to another room. The door was open, and inside was a fresh portrait of his mother, Mary. "What? What's going on? What is this?" Holding back anger, I sighed and explained. "Mary passed away while you were on your trip." "The funeral is already over," I said, and Ken glared at me furiously. "Don't joke, this can't be. Why should she die? It was your mother who was supposed to be." I was appalled by his disgraceful outburst, but told him calmly what happened after my mother's accident. "My mom woke up after the accident. She's recovering from a fracture. My mother is still in the hospital, but thankfully, she was alive thanks to the medical team's efforts." Ken, still not understanding, asked, "Then why is my mom?" I struggled to say, "The day your mom fell from the pedestrian bridge, she was on her way to our house." I suggested he had told her about the trip.
You told your mom in advance that you were going on a trip, right?
Huh? Oh, I did say that. Mary has been distrustful of you lately. She says she hasn't been able to contact you often. That's why I think she was planning on coming to see if you were really going on the trip. When I said that, Ken's eyes widened in surprise. A month ago, Mary told me that she used to hear from Ken almost every day with calls and texts, but recently, the communication had almost stopped. She'd try to call him because of urgent matters, and when he'd call back, he'd say he was busy and hang up quickly. Mary thought maybe Ken was just getting older and not clinging to his mom as much. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Ken was hiding something. That's why, driven by suspicion, she went to check if Ken really was on a company trip at the exact time I received the call about my mom's accident. It turns out that Mary had passed away carrying the souvenirs she bought with my mom on a day trip last month, probably intending to drop by under the pretext of giving us those gifts. I was so distraught that day, I couldn't think of anything but getting to the hospital as quickly as possible, and I didn't have the presence of mind to tell Mary about my mom's accident. Mary had taken the bus to the stop nearest to our apartment and must have been walking the rest from there. There's a pedestrian overpass on the way, and it seems she fell while crossing it. Witnesses say she lost her footing just before reaching the top and tumbled down. An ambulance was called immediately, but she had hit her head hard. And so, Mary was gone. After explaining all this to Ken, I glared at him fiercely.
After learning about Mary, I called you so many times.
For 2 weeks, no matter how I tried to reach him, Ken never answered his phone or returned my emails. Since there was no other relative who could arrange the funeral, I did all. I had to take on that role and managed to get through Mary's funeral while my mom was still in a critical state.
These past 2 weeks, you've been ignoring my calls and gallivanting around, right? This whole thing has shown me exactly what kind of person you are. I'm divorcing you.
When I declared that, Ken just collapsed to the floor and started bawling.
You. How can you talk about divorce right after your mom passed? And I didn't contact you because I was always with my coworkers. I didn't have the time.
He blubbered, making excuses. I was getting even angrier. Stop lying. I shouted, pulling out a piece of paper from my bag and thrusting it in front of Ken. It was a schedule for the trip I found in Ken's room.
It says here the trip was from the 12th to the 19th for 1 week. But you were gone from the 5th to the 19th.
Right before you left, you said the trip was 2 weeks.
So where were you and what were you doing for that first week? Well,
I know what you've been up to. You've been cheating, haven't you? And you spent that week with her, didn't you? I said, confident in my accusation. Ken stopped crying and started to panic. What are you talking about, cheating?
I took the rest of the week off to travel with a friend for a break.
I've been so busy at work lately. Sick of his lies, I pulled out a smartphone from my pocket. The moment Ken saw that, his face turned pale. This phone was Ken's, found in his wardrobe while he was away. There's probably another smartphone in Ken's bag. He probably had another phone in his bag to communicate with his mistress. Ken had said he couldn't contact me while he was away, but he had left his regular phone at home, so of course, he wouldn't notice any calls.
You're full of lies. You left this phone at home to spend time with your lover, didn't you?
When I placed the smartphone in front of Ken, he started shaking and banged his fist on the floor. Yeah, that's right. I've been fed up with you for a long time. I have someone else I love now, he yelled defiantly, and then, wait, how did you know where to find the phone? You didn't snoop through my room while I was gone, did you? I was appalled. I glanced at Mary's portrait, apologizing to her in my mind for this display before responding. Mary told me, I said, and Ken choked on his words. After a big fight over my mom, Ken started coming home late and going out alone on his days off, claiming to be working. When I started feeling suspicious because of his unnatural periods of unavailability, I talked to Mary about it. Mary, who also had her doubts about Ken, gave me some advice.
He's always had a habit of hiding things that don't suit him. Like a bad test score or a glass that your father cherished that he broke by accident. He used to keep these things carefully in the back of his wardrobe. If there were a bunch of towels in the back of the drawer, I would probably hide them there.
After my mother-in-law passed away, I remembered those words and searched in Ken's room, and as expected, I found a smartphone.
No way, Mom did that to you.
Ken seemed genuinely shocked to find out his beloved mother, Mary, had doubted him. Despite his dismay, I felt nothing for him and sternly told him, because of what happened, I am asking you the divorce, and I'm willing to talk to a lawyer and take this to court if necessary. Ken groaned but, realizing he had no escape, he reluctantly agreed. After we properly divided our assets, the divorce went through without a hitch. But the following month, just as I was settling into my new life, Ken called. Reluctantly, I answered, and he blurted out, "Erica. Please, I need your help."
What now, Ken? What happened?
He was in trouble because his company found out about Mary's funeral. Mary had been listed as a dependent for Ken's benefits, so he was supposed to return her insurance card to the company after her passing. The company only learned of her death through this process, and it became apparent that her funeral happened while Ken was supposed to be on a company trip. His colleagues viewed him coldly, considering him an ungrateful son for not attending his own mother's funeral. Ken tried to shift the blame by saying I didn't inform him about the funeral. However, it probably wasn't a good idea to rush and tell so many people. He told different stories to different people at his workplace. It led to inconsistencies that revealed his lies. Already seen as irresponsible, his repeated lies made people doubt his character even more, leading to his isolation and eventual resignation from his job. Now without an income, Ken was living off Mary's inheritance at her house.
The neighbors found out I didn't attend the funeral, and it's awkward just walking outside. I thought about selling the house, but it's old and won't sell.
Ken is recognized by the neighbors as a bastard son, and seems to be uncomfortable even walking outside. So he made arrangements to sell my in-laws' house and move in as soon as possible, but since it's an old house, there doesn't seem to be any sign of it selling.
Erica, let's start over. Remarry me, and let's live together again.
I was disgusted when I heard those words. I realized he only reached out because he was in a tough spot, and I replied firmly.
Don't be ridiculous. I want nothing to do with you, especially not a remarriage. I beg you, if you keep this up, I don't know you anymore. You should just live with the person you're cheating on with instead of me.
When Ken refused with all his might, he began to mumble something. No, actually. I've already broken up with my partner. He continued to beg, revealing that his affair partner had left him after finding out about Mary's funeral and that he had been married all along. Ken apparently hid the fact that he was married, and was dumped by the woman he was furious with, so he is now alone. I told him coldly, you got what you deserved. I have no intention of being with someone like you. As I was about to hang up, Ken frantically said, wait. If you won't agree to remarry, I'll come to your house and talk directly. You're at your parents' place, right? I cut him off with a lie, no, I'm not there, to which he quickly asked.
Then where are you?
I'm not telling you.
And by the way, I've changed jobs, so even if you wait outside my old workplace, it won't do you any good. I've told everyone to call the police if they see you around.
I decided to sell my parents' house in order to distance myself from Ken as much as possible due to this incident. However, since my parents' house is quite old, it is unlikely that they will find a buyer. So, with my mother's consent, I turned it into a vacant lot and sold it. Speaking of my mother, she was finally discharged from the hospital recently, but she lost her mother-in-law, who was a dear friend, and she is feeling quite haggard. So I moved to another place where I could live quietly with my mother. As a result, I quit the company I was working for and changed jobs.
Then at least tell me where you are. I was also visiting your mother, who has been taking care of me until now.
Ken was desperately trying to find out where I was, but his words made me angry and my voice was surprisingly cold.
Taking care of you? You've been complaining about my mother a lot, but don't say such convenient words now. Besides, my mother also says she doesn't want to see you again. Hey, wait a minute, Erica!
Ken was still yelling something, but I ended the call without mercy. After hanging up, I blocked his number and later changed it. I later learned that Ken couldn't manage his savings, and he was currently in a difficult situation. Ken is struggling with debt and unable to find steady work, resorting to day jobs and part-time work. As for my mother and me, we started anew elsewhere and were free from the stress related to Ken. She had been unable to visit Mary's grave due to her hospital stay and our move. It seems like she still hasn't come to terms with the fact that Mary has passed away, and she often cries looking at photos and videos of her dear friend. I want to go see Mary soon, she says sadly, so I promised we would visit the grave soon, carefully planning to avoid running into Ken. I'm focused on supporting my mother and making the most of our lives in this new place.